Welcome to the Marketing Optimist sandwich course. Today it's a little bit different, so we're not really talking about marketing per se, but we're going to talk to Natalie Moran, who is the new CEO of Simon on the Streets, a Leeds-based charity that helps the homeless people of Leeds, Kirklees and Bradford, and I'm sure Natalie will correct me if I've got that wrong. We've, at the Marketing Optimist, we've been a supporter of Simon on the Streets. Well, to be honest, since before Marketing Optimist, at my previous employment at a translation company, we supported Simon on the Streets, and I did a sleep out for them while I worked there. Then when I started my own business, I was looking for a charity, and Simon on the Streets is just, I don't know, just kind of touches me, and it hits something inside me. So that's the one that we adopted when we kicked off Simon on the Streets. So I guess without further ado, I'll introduce you to Natalie. And if you could tell us a bit about Simon on the Streets and the work you guys are doing.
Great, yeah. Hi everyone. So yeah, thanks ever so much, Richard. Really appreciate you inviting me today. It's it's fairly topical, I think, homelessness, and has been for the last few months. So it's kind of nice to have these sort of platforms as well. So yeah, as Richard said, I'm fairly new, although I don't know if I'm allowed to call myself new anymore. I've been here since May. So it really is the optimum time to change your job role in the middle of a pandemic. I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. So I came in May just as the chaos was, well, in chaos. And my background is, I mean, I've been in the public sector for about 14 years, managed various drugs and alcohol services in Leeds, Hull, Sheffield. And the most recent job before coming here was I was an area manager at St Anne's Community Services. So I managed a range of mental health, homelessness, drugs and alcohol services. So it's very much, the homelessness sector has always been really at the heart of what I've done, and it's been a real passion of mine. So when this role came up, I was super excited. I knew the previous CEO from some work that we'd done together years ago. And we were doing some work together with Simon on the Street at St Anne's, which we're still doing now. So I came into post in May. As Richard said, we've got outreach workers who are based across Leeds, Bradford and Kirklees. As you can imagine, Leeds being a big city and the biggest of the cities is probably where the heart of a lot of our work is. And we do a range of work in terms of homelessness. So it's not just about the people that are visible on the streets that you see. We do a lot of work with people who are vulnerably housed. We do a lot of work with people who are surfing, and I'll talk more about that actually a little bit later on, if that's okay, because we are doing a bit of an event actually coming up to Christmas around that to raise awareness. So it's very much, it's been a real journey for us in the last few months because COVID has had such a huge impact on this sector. As you'll all know, the government did a great job, to be fair, of getting everybody in. They did get everybody in, and I was part of that in my previous role in supporting that movement. We're now left with the issue of the what next, and things are starting to unravel, if I'm honest, a little bit across all three areas. So yes, you know, visibly it's reduced in terms of homelessness and people on the streets. I think Leeds has pretty much reduced their rough sleepers by about 50% since pre-COVID, which obviously is fantastic and, you know, can't take away from that. But unfortunately, the hotels across those three areas have started getting the hotels back. A lot of clients who just aren't ready and in that space to be able to take up some of the accommodation they've been offered or cope in some of the emergency accommodation have ended up back on the streets. So our work during COVID turned from being outreach to inreach, if I'm honest. So supporting people in the emergency accommodation, we're very much back to being on the streets, on outreach, doing that really visible work again, because we're seeing a lot of people back on the streets. So it's been really, really tough. And I think what's fair to say about Simon and the work we've done is that we've very much been out there since day one. You know, we've seen a lot of commission services had to withdraw some of their workers. They've changed a lot of their provision to over the phone provision, which is not overly helpful to a lot of our client group who don't have phones. But we've very much stayed on the street and done that very much face-to-face contact. So the workers have been through, you know, a really, really tough time, and we've had this kind of plateau of over probably the last sort of 6 weeks where it's felt like things have calmed down, and then all of a sudden you can just feel that it's starting to pick up again. So yeah, it's incredibly tough. So you know, we've had some amazing outcomes though throughout COVID. So I don't want to get, you know, sounds really depressing, the picture I'm painting at the moment, and don't get me wrong, it's been really tough, but because of having people in a place where we can do that work from, we've been able to get some fantastic outcomes and see through in a way that Simon possibly hasn't been able to do previously, really see people through that journey into accommodation and beyond. So, you know, in Bradford, we're supporting a lot of clients who've moved into their own accommodation. They're probably not ready to be doing that on their own, but we're doing a lot of that emotional support. We're visiting them, we're just checking in on them, making sure they're getting help with things like budgeting, food provision and that kind of thing. Same in Kirklees. Kirklees did a great job, to be fair, of getting everybody in quite quickly. And the numbers aren't as big in Kirklees, which of course helps. But again, we've done a lot of work to sustain those tenancies for people and give that support for people who did get accommodation. Kirklees is seeing a lot of people currently coming from out of area, rough sleeping. So we're back doing a lot of outreach in Kirklees and picking up a lot of people who seem to be coming from other areas now. So that's something that just seems to be creeping up again. In Leeds, we've done a really big piece of work with clients who've had no recourse to public funds. So you may have seen some of this stuff in the news over the last few months, because prior to COVID, clients who were classed as not having any settled status here and having no recourse, there was no duty to give them any sort of accommodation by the council. So, for example, we were working with a group of clients who'd they basically made themselves an encampment at the bottom of the M621 last November. A group of about 6 clients who were Eastern European. We supported them as best we could in terms of that emotional support, practical support in the encampment. We visited them really regularly, but there was no options for them because there was no duty from the council. When everyone in came, that was everybody. So we'd had this opportunity all of a sudden to be able to support people, you know, more effectively and move them into emergency accommodation. So that's been an amazing piece of work. Leeds have accommodated about 50 clients who are no recourse, and those 50 clients over the last few months, we have pretty much with all of them worked through, got their ID, taken them to the embassy, managed to get them universal credit, managed to get them the settled status, managed to link them into health, and now we're seeing them moving on into accommodation. So that's been a phenomenal piece of work, which had COVID not have happened, we just wouldn't have been able to do. So it's kind of opened up these strange opportunities that we would never have thought we could have. So now, again, it's all about that the clock is ticking. So, for example, with the NRPF clients, what the government has said is that we've basically got till December with this client group to get them either into employment or repatriated back into their own country. So bearing in mind, getting a passport for someone can take up to 12 weeks and has done, it leaves us in a bit of a difficult position. So yeah, it's really tough. There's a lot of work going on now, obviously, to try and get that piece of work done and try and get people where they need to be. But we're racing against time now, effectively. So yeah, so it's been busy and tough.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. It's tough enough for, like I said, we all sit there in our nice warm homes with food, and we might have to, I don't know, if there's another kind of rush on toilet rolls, we might have a bit of a fight, that bundle down at the Sainsbury's to get hold of some toilet rolls. But at the end of the day, we've still got nice warm homes to come home to, and I can't imagine what it's like being on the streets when this is happening. I mean, just from a kind of practical point of view, some of the people on the streets who passers by will give change to, or will go and buy sandwiches or drinks, or people who will support people sat on the streets because they've got a bit of kindness in them. Well, where's that gone? Because even like random sandwiches or random cups of coffee, or somebody who gives them the odd pound or whatever, effectively all their footfall, and that's going to sound a really awful term, but there's nobody doing that anymore.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's exactly what happened. So I don't know if any of you, if you walked around some of the big cities during pandemic, and it was like a ghost town, really, really quite eerie. Leeds City, walking up and down Brigger, was just a really weird experience, and that was the immediate impact was, yes, we have a number of people who, are they're begging. They might not be rough sleepers, they might not be homeless, but they're begging. And if they're begging, there's a reason for them begging. So do you know what? That you can't. It is what it is. But all of that disappeared. So you just saw this real impact of, the grassroots people who were going out and doing the soup kitchens. That obviously they all went, and everything was really. Just really, really difficult because there was nobody about anymore. There was nobody. So we actually did get a bit of funding through the big change in Leeds to get food, and we worked with the Crypt to give out food specifically to people who were in temporary accommodation but struggling because food times are at a certain time. A lot of our clients struggle with that, with timescales because of the chaos they've lived in for so long. So and that support, as great as it wasn't person-centered support. It was everybody in, here you are, you get a meal at this time, a meal at that time, and that's brilliant. But actually, that's really difficult for somebody who's had no concept of time because they've been an entrenched rough sleeper for the last 5-10 years. So yeah, it didn't solve all the problems, and there were still little bits of pieces of work that really needed doing. And I know, is that sorry, Gary, you've just put in the chat, and you're quite right. A big issue is that nobody carries cash. That's a bit. It is. You're absolutely right. We've seen that through. It's something that we're looking at in terms of a fundraising thing. But yeah, people don't carry cash around. So I think that's part of the issue as well. When people were coming back out and shops had started to reopen again, and that is a very real thing. I mean, I don't really carry cash at the moment. It's a bizarre thing, isn't it? Where that seems to be, that whole conversation about cashless society is becoming more and more prominent.
Although that's been it's not kind of part of the push to say all cashless, but I think people have kind of gone, I don't know, subconsciously gone, well, I'm not going to go to the shop and give somebody a 10 quid or whatever else. They'll just go, I'll just use my card.
Yeah.
And that you're right, that is a massive issue for everyone. Like I say, for all us sat in our nice warm homes, that's fine. We can all, that's not a problem at all. But for somebody who maybe needs that odd pound, whatever, to just get a sandwich or a warm drink inside them, I just don't know. I don't have any answers.
I think people are still quite torn about what to do. And it was funny, I had a conversation with one of our trustees recently, and she said, I still don't know what to do when I see a homeless person, and it makes me ashamed because I'm a trustee of a homeless charity, but I still don't know, do I give them money? And I think I can't remember which council it was a few years ago, did a real campaign about do not give people money on the street because they're going to use it for addictions or whatever. And I just think, at the end of the day, you've got to kind of use your own judgment for it. If you see someone hungry and you want to give them something, absolutely give them something, because that's your personal choice, isn't it? If you want to go buy them a sandwich, again, absolutely. I don't think there's any right and wrong to it, but I think it is very difficult. Certainly the public don't like to be told what to do with the money and what not to do. And I think that was part of the problem with the campaign they did a few years ago. But there's got to be that kind of, well, it's your personal choice, isn't it? And, actually, if they're in addiction and they use that money to get a bottle of whiskey, they're on the street, and it's a really tough one, isn't it? And I'm sat here as a CEO of a homeless charity. I'm not, I just think, well, you have to do what feels right for you at the end of the day. And like I say, that's where we come in with some of that practical and a bit of that emotional support. For clients who actually don't want to engage with some of the local authority stuff as well, because they may have had bad experiences before, and they're quite mistrustful of services. A lot of our clients as well, possibly because they've been let down.
Yeah, I think there's also a perception among some people, and I think it's probably the kind of an older generation thing. Probably my parents' generation would have kind of gone, well, they can get a home if they want to, they can get shelter if they want to, and I think that's a big perception that needs to be gone down, and especially that sort of thing starts to stack up a lot more in times like this, when the general public have gone into almost like a self-preservation mode. We're almost like we're under, I don't know, it's almost like a warlike situation at the moment, isn't it? Nobody of my generation has ever been through the war, but this is kind of a closing of liberty, the kind of thing that must have kind of kind of happened at that point. And I think it's easy for people to go, look, I'm looking after myself now. So people outside of my bubble, which is the term we're all getting used to, outside my bubble really don't matter. And that again must be a massive issue for you guys to try and get that word out there, to go, look, we know you're not physically interacting with these people, but they've not gone away. They've just kind of been, they still need your support.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was part of the everyone in. There was a little bit of that you almost take that visibility away and it doesn't exist, but actually it's very, very prevalent. And there was still an awful lot of work to do, of course, with even things like the education around COVID itself at the beginning. We were all, every social media channel you looked at on the news, it was coming at us left, right and centre, but actually for people on the street, that wasn't the case. So all of that hand washing, looking after yourself, that, the ways of social distancing, all of that kind of educational stuff was part of the original piece of work that the outreach workers did. Actually was a lot of that education stuff around COVID itself, and how to try and, where possible, keep yourself safe. And very hard, because a lot of provisions were removed as well. I mean, I part of my service before I came to Simon was the St Anne's Resource Centre, which was a day centre where the homeless would come during the day and they could have access to showers and food. We had to close that down on the 23rd of March, and it was heartbreaking, because I had my commissioner going, you've got to shut it down because there's no way of socially distancing. And we ran a breakfast club from 6 in the morning, and it was just horrendous, because but there's nowhere else. What are we going to do? What provision are you going to put in place? And the provision was the accommodation they went into, but then of course it was that hand holding to make sure people stayed in the accommodation, trying to explain the lockdown and what, yes, you can go out for a bit of exercise, but you have to come back. It was, really, really tough to try and explain that to a client group who was so used to being very transient, very independent, and then all of a sudden being very, very restricted in what they could do. So it's been really, really hard. And now, of course, a lot of those people are really struggling with that environment. And a lot of people we work with are not ready for accommodation. They're just not ready for it. They need a lot more support with the mental health, a lot more support with the physical health. And so the people, for example, in Leeds at the moment, there's probably, at the last street count, I think there was about 35 people rough sleeping. Prior to March, there was about 60 odd. So like I say, it's about 50%. But every single one of those people is really, really well known to most services in Leeds, certainly to us. And there'll be various reasons that they don't want to move. They don't want to move into the accommodation they've been offered, but there's no alternative. There's a lot of work going on at the moment with the people who are still on the streets that we are trying to move. And it's a long, long process. And if, like I said, I was just saying to Richard before we came on, that it sounds like Leeds now has gone into some extra measures this week. It's, again, how does that impact those people, and what's going to be the impact on them going forward in the city centres where they're maybe not getting the access that they were getting before. So it's really, really, really difficult times, and everything's changing so quickly, and we as an organisation are trying to adapt very quickly to that change. And fundraising is a big part of that, because of course some of our really big events haven't been able to go ahead, so we've had to change the way we think about the way we fundraise as well, and things that we're doing in the same way that everybody has.
And how are the local lockdowns affecting the kind of support teams as well? Because obviously they kind of, you have these things like, you can't meet more than 6 people in your garden, which is fine for us. But obviously, if a support team, I'm guessing they go out in pairs or threes or whatever to ensure their safety.
Yeah.
How are they navigating all this? Because that sounds... Yeah,
it's not. It's a tricky. I mean, it is, and it's something, and again, it's ever changing, and there's no real guidance when the guidance comes out, guidance in inverted commas. So there's no real guidance for it. So you kind of having to just do, risk assess it in the best way that you can. So we do work in pairs. What tends to happen in Kirklees, because we only have one outreach worker, is that she will work with some of the other services. But the struggle with that has actually been that a lot of those services have gone to telephone contact only, even the outreach teams, which is a bit of a bone of contention for me, because I'm like, well, surely you're a key worker, or you're either doing it or you're not, kind of thing. You can't do that work over the phone. So we've had to utilise some of our other workers to go over and pair up. And so for me, it's been trying to manage the peaks and troughs of the different areas. Right, this week, do we need more people in Leeds? And it has changed. You know, Bradford was a bit quiet. We moved some people from Bradford to Leeds. Bradford started to step up again. We moved some people from Leeds to Bradford. So it's just ever changing, and it's about just keeping our eye on the ball and making sure we can get as much support to the areas that need it.
Okay. So I'm gonna open it up a little bit. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to particularly ask Natalie? Anything they'd like to know?
Hello. Is my microphone working all right now?
Yes, we can hear you, Russell, that way.
So thanks for that, Natalie. I was just trying to think in anywhere in the lessons learnt. So I do appreciate. I really heard the comment around, yes, some people went into accommodation, but they're not ready for it yet. But for those that did, out of the COVID circumstances, go into accommodation, are there any useful lessons learnt around what works around that? Has there been an inadvertent positive byproduct of learning something around that can we just find a way of doing more of that in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what was really, I mean, it's interesting. The three areas operate very differently. So, you know, Kirklees Council, Bradford and Leeds all operate very, very differently. And the structure of their homeless teams is very different. The great thing about Leeds is that I'm quite involved in Leeds, and I have been for a long time, more strategically. So with Leeds, I was very much involved in, you know, they have regular, what they call street support meetings. So they have all of their commissioned homelessness services under the Street Reach Out umbrella. And they used to have a meeting every month. And during COVID, they met every single week, which was brilliant because it was really keeping the eye on the ball. And even though we're not a commissioned service, we were always invited to those meetings, which was great because we were part of that. We were part of helping those other services. So what every local authority did, to be fair, although I was more involved in it in Leeds than I was anywhere else, was that during the everyone in, as people were being accommodated temporarily, they were looking at, okay, what are we going to need for this to be sustainable? Because obviously the hotels were always going to go at some point. So what was done was a kind of needs analysis, if you like, of everybody who was being accommodated in the area. So to give you an example, Leeds, you know, massive contingency of clients with no recourse to public funds. What do we need for them? What does that look like? So what happened at I think it was July time, all local authorities were asked to do what was called an ask paper to government. So that basically outlined, right, what do we need in our local authority to sustain this brilliant initiative to get everyone in? What do these people need? So there was a bit of a needs analysis done, and we were part of that around the types of accommodation that were needed for people, whether that was supported, whether they were individual units of accommodation, which is a massive gap in Leeds. And that paper was written along with the money that would need to go with that, and that all went into local authority. So all different areas did that. And the idea of that was to really get that, you know, we've now got an opportunity, and that's what we were all saying. This is an opportunity now to look at, right, what is it that we actually need? And as much as, you know, I ran the homelessness service in Leeds, and it was brilliant. Actually, you know, was it helpful? Because all it did was provide all the, you know, we provided food and showers and everything else, but actually they wouldn't need that if they had the proper accommodation with wraparound support. So that's kind of what it's looked at, and we're still waiting. I think that there's been some rumblings this week, but nothing official yet, that we have had something back from MHCLG, Ministry of Housing, to say what money every local, how much money every local authority's got. So there's definitely been, you know, and some local authorities will have done a better job of that than others, and some will have been more inclusive than others. Like I say, Bradford and Kirklees, we weren't part of that process, which is a bit sad because we're very much part of the process on the street. But Leeds, we were really lucky to be included in that. So I think, hopefully that they really have responded to that in a really positive way and really identified what they need. It's just having the money to back it up now, of course, to be able to deliver on that.
No, it is always that thing around money is spent on all of those services, and it is always trying to reframe the conversation around, so these different things costs, but so you're already spending money. It's in a budget somewhere on this thing. All we're asking you to do is to transfer it into here, and actually, lo and behold, you may not need as much. And it always just fascinates me that that's a conversation that just doesn't seem to get through sometimes. It's insane.
Yeah. And that's why it was like, well, this is your, you know, it was interesting because in Leeds anyway, they were retendering, they were in the process of retendering out all of the different individual services. And I think the idea, certainly 2 years ago, was to look at kind of consortium arrangement where you have the provider and then somebody else delivering everything else. And so much changed during COVID, and I think the way we all looked at things changed a lot as well. So yeah, I'm really, I feel quite positive that they do it. You know, they've really responded. Of course, like I say, the issue is having the money to back up what they've asked, and we're still waiting to find out what that looks like.
Thank you.
So, does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask Natalie?
Yeah, can I please, Natalie? I'm really sorry I came late. I was on another meeting, so apologies everyone, and apologies if I'm not sure, Natalie, you've covered this. So I'm Carl. I'm a digital designer. I work out of Leeds, so I haven't been into the city for a while. So my question is, Natalie, how is it at the moment? Because I did go in actually a few weeks ago just to run in, pick something up and come out, and I mean the streets look pretty much empty, loads of buildings for rent and everything. So how has it been for people on the streets during COVID? And I'm sorry if you've covered it, but I'm super interested.
I was just saying, during the everyone in, when they did get everyone in, it was, and I was just saying, Leeds particularly was, you know, a real ghost town when everything shut down. Obviously, everybody was on the street. We had the odd, you know, we'd have the, you know, odd, I don't know, 4 or 5 people who would be on the street at night, and I think they soon realised that there was no one about, so it was, you know, they couldn't do that anyway. Things have definitely changed in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks. What we did notice was when the shops opened again, which was at the beginning of August that happened. I can't remember when I can't remember the date now, but it actually timed with a piece of work that we'd got some grant funding to do, which was a 6-week. What we'd asked to do was a 6-week evening pilot, because there's no commission services currently doing evening outreach work, other than Simon that does a super run on a Tuesday night. So we did get some money again from the big change in Leeds to do this piece of work, and it was noticeably different from that week because we timed it to when the shops had reopened. So we noticed that as footfall increased, begging increased, we were starting to see some of the evictions that were taking place from the hotels. So some of our clients who were very well known actually, who were really struggling in that environment, and being asked to leave. And you know, to be fair, they might have bounced around 3 or 4 different places, but just couldn't settle, couldn't comply with the restrictions that were in place. So we did start to see that creep up again. I was just saying, pre-lockdown, rough sleep accounts usually about 60 in Leeds, and at the moment it's about 35. So it has made a massive difference, but definitely we are seeing, you know, I was just talking to the outreach workers on Wednesday morning because we'd done our super run on Tuesday night, and there is certainly, yeah, it's really picked up. There's a lot more people out now than there has been on an evening. I think the issue is though, there's nobody picking those people up, because as I said, there's no commission providers doing that evening outreach work, which I think is a real gap. And again, really what we want to do is have more workers to be able to pick some of this piece of work up, and it's something that we're talking to local authority about. So yeah, it's definitely it's not back to where it was, absolutely not, but it's definitely starting to go in that direction a bit.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks.
Gary, did you have a question?
Just a general comment, really, rather than a question. I really like throughout your discussion, Natalie, you've referred to homeless people as clients rather than, you know, any other alternative word. And I really like that they're seen as you're working for them, not for a governing body or a council, government, whoever. So I just wanted to pick that up.
And you know, it's funny, you know, if you talk about, it's really strange for me because for some reason, and it's happening more and more, housing teams now in councils refer to clients as customers. So they talk about them as customers, which again, it's just really odd how it's changed over the years. I mean, I've been in all my years in public sector and working in like drugs and alcohol services, it used to be service user was how we used to talk about clients, and now and that kind of changed. But yeah, I mean, for me, and certainly the work we do, and this is the joy for me, to be honest, because I've always been bound by the constraints of commissioned services. That's my background. So the joy for me of this job is that we're not doing that. We can, you know, it is person-centered, and it, you know, and you know, where I've worked before and worked in commission services, people try really hard to do that person-centered stuff. But ultimately, if you've got targets to hit to get your funding, you can't always be as person-centered as you want to be. And the joy of this role and the work that we do is that we absolutely can be, and we are. So a really good example of that is some of the work we were doing in Bradford and working very closely with their homeless outreach team. They had targets to move those people in emergency accommodation into permanent accommodation, which, you know, great. I get that. I get why you would want to do that. However, so many of those people just weren't ready. And actually, when we were talking to them, they would say, that's not my priority at the moment. My priority isn't moving into a house. My priority is actually, I haven't seen my kids for 6 months, and I really want to kind of do some work on that, because that's going to drive me to kind of sustain anything going forward. So yeah, I feel like I finally feel, I suppose, that I work for and with an organisation now that we're really true to that value of that person-centred approach, and that's probably why we use that term clients, because everything that we do is about what they're telling us they want rather than what we think they need, which does happen, and it comes from a good place, but it also is because you are bound by some of the targets that you're working towards.
So obviously, as I've said at the beginning, I've been supporting you for must be like 7-8 years now, on and off, and the business has been sort of supporting Simon on the Street since we began. And I know Tim down there in the corner, I know he's a massive advocate, and he's actually supported us support you, giving us some big donations when we've done things to support you. So thank you for that, Tim. Thank you, Tim. That's your tagline, isn't it? Thank you, Tim. So how are you doing with raising funds going forward? What are you doing? Is there anything we can help with? How can we help you to help Simon?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, you know, we are amazingly fortunate to have, you know, yourself, Richard, Tim. We've got a whole host of really really passionate supporters who support what we do, and you know, but the reality of that is, and certainly a lot of our corporate partners, you know, everyone's been affected. So, you know, we are very much all in it together, and we've all been impacted. So, you know, I had a meeting last week with one of our corporate supporters, and we're their charity of the year, and they were phoning to apologise because they hadn't been able to fundraise in the way they would normally, because nobody was working from the office, and a lot of their fundraising activity was done by staff who were in the office and doing stuff. And I'm like, gosh, please don't apologise. It's, you know, it is where it is, and I get it, and, you know, thank you, you know, and but they're still doing bits and pieces, but it's not on that same scale. So yeah, absolutely, we have seen that decrease in funds coming through, which I suppose, you know, we were expecting. And for me, when I came in May, you know, and we had a sort of, you know, a schedule of events, it was almost like, right, we'll cross those out, because we can't. So the big sleep out that we would have done in August, which is one of our sort of flagship fundraising events, we couldn't go ahead with that. Our ball that was set for October, that's had to be cancelled. So these are some of the real sort of the more meaty fundraising events that would actually, you know, year on year have consistently brought in a lot of money to the charity and kept us going. So we've really had to rethink stuff. So we have a charity golf event on the 8th of October. We've never done a golf event. I know nothing about golf. It's almost comedical that I'm actually planning this event, because honestly, I find myself saying things like, can we make it look golfy? And people look at me, what are you talking about? Luckily, we have had help with somebody who does organise charity golf events, thank goodness. If it was left to me, it would be again, it'd be probably quite funny, but not very practical. So we've got that going ahead on the 8th of October, and I think even with all the restrictions at the moment, it looks okay because it's classed as an outdoor sporting event. So I think we're going to be safe with that, fingers crossed. But actually, the other thing I learned about the golf event is that you probably need about 3, 4, 5 months planning, and we've sort of tried to do it in about 8 weeks. So yes, so we've still got, if anyone's interested in golf, that's going ahead on the 8th of October. We're just going to start planning next week our it's World Homeless Day on the 10th of October. So we'll be doing, we're going to be promoting our new event that's going to take us up to Christmas, which is our Big Surfer Surf. I touched on this earlier on. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term surfer surfing. I don't think it's massively common outside of the homelessness sector, but it is, again, one of the big issues. And we saw it a lot actually during COVID, where that what we call hidden homeless, so, you know, people who are not visibly on the streets, a lot of that came to the fore, and that could be through domestic violence issues. Again, people who had no recourse to public funds who were being put up because they were doing some cash in hand work. Once that went, they were out on the streets. People weren't putting people up anymore. So we did, again, from an engagement perspective and that opportunity of working with people that we would never have seen, COVID actually did bring a lot of that to the fore. So because we were talking about this when it happened, and I was saying, actually, maybe the surfer surf is something we really need to really kind of educate about and start talking more about. So that's why, in place of the big sleep out, we're going to be doing the big surfer surf. So quite easy for people to do. It'll be basically encouraging people to sleep on your sofa, and something everyone can do. They can do from home. We do have a celebrity endorsement. He's a Leeds rugby, Leeds Rhinos. I know nothing about rugby or golf. Football, I'm all right with football. Golf and rugby, not so much. But apparently he's a rugby player, and he's going to endorse it for us. So we're going to start working on that and sort of getting the word out there in line with World Homeless Day, and we're going to launch it around that. So yeah, hopefully lots of opportunity to kind of support, and I suppose for today, just really talking, just to keep talking about us and what we do. We're on all social media platforms. If you see us, please share us. And yeah, and if you do need any more information or you want anything, just obviously give me a shout. I'm quite happy to talk to teams. Somebody asked a few weeks ago if I'd go and just talk to a couple of the teams in their department about the work we're doing. More than happy to do that. So yeah, that would be great.
Oh, I mean, what we'll do, obviously, we've got on the page that everyone booked through, that we've got a link there to, we've got a Just Giving page which gives to you guys, and we'll obviously put those links on, and we'll put link on when I put this on YouTube and everywhere else, there'll be links to the charity and everything. Because yeah, for me, as I said years ago when I first met, and I can't remember the lady's name now, one of the outreach people from people who were talking to corporates about doing sponsorship, it just really touched a massive nerve, and I've never forgotten it. And for me, it's always one of those things of, you're only kind of, anyone can be kind of 3 months away from being on the streets. It's really, I mean, it's probably less, I don't know, but it feels like that, where things can just tumble, things go wrong, and they just keep going wrong, and before you know it, you're that person.
Just to say quickly on that, we've just worked with a lady in Bradford who has been sleeping in her car for the last 3 months.
Wow.
Had her own business pre-COVID, lost her business, lost her accommodation, has family that she's too proud to tell that she lost her business to. And basically, how we found out about it was a bit random. It was just somebody had seen this car, and it was all, anyway, we went to see her, and now we have managed to get her into emergency accommodation. We've supported her to contact her son who lives down south. But that's how she's lived from, and this is somebody, again, you know, she had her own business, she had, you know, and COVID has had this horrendous impact, and you know, that's an amazing piece of work to be part of, to think that, you know, we you know, how long would she have carried on doing that for, and what would, and the state of her mental health by the end. I mean, already when we, you know, luckily, you know, we've got her linked into mental health services, which has been great, and she's managing to get some support, but you know, you think, how much longer could that have gone on for, really, you know?
Oh, sobering. Very.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, does anyone have anything else they'd like to ask Natalie? Sure, Tim, yeah.
Just, where do you think it's going to be, like in March, if there's going to be more unemployment, and they're now starting to bringing back the courts to evict people? Do you think there's going to be a huge jump in homelessness with a lack of resource, because the government's knackered financially as well?
You know what? Yeah, I do. I think that's the worrying thing for me. And I think when I came into the organisation in May, you know, with plans for, I want to expand. I know that we needed in more areas. I know we needed in more cities, and this is kind of my long-term goal. You know, when I think about what's happening at the moment and look at the future, it just doesn't look good. You know, and even with the money, because when I talked before about the ask papers and the local authorities looking at, you're talking about looking at what we have now. So that's very much focused on the here and now, the people who've been in emergency accommodation, and the numbers of that are quite high. But like you say, you've got a whole new wave of homelessness that is coming. It's absolutely coming. And it's interesting, the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had more and more phone calls from people saying, I'm in private accommodation and my landlord's on the, you know, once this ban goes, I am going to be evicted, and what can I do and who can you link me in with? So those calls are absolutely on the increase, and you know, with jobs going and everything else. So yeah, my real fear is that and this is what ties into the fundraising stuff as well, and why we're trying to do so much of the stuff, is that I just genuinely feel we're needed in so many more places. Because the commission services are great, don't get me wrong. I've got the utmost respect for the people we work with, and they do an incredible job, but there are just people who need that wraparound support for longer than commission services can provide, and that's part of the issue, that it is that's where the gap is across all these services, and no commission provider can really fill that, because they can't afford to give a service money to hold on to 2 clients for 6 months, and that's where we kind of come in. So yeah, I think we are kind of almost preparing for that next phase. And I was saying before, there was this little bit of a lull, and you almost feel it was a bit of a calm before the storm, and we're kind of seeing it pick up. And you know, my worry for Christmas, for the new year, and the cold weather and everything else that goes with that is, yeah, it's a really worrying time, Tim, for us. I hope I've depressed you all sufficiently for a Friday. Enjoy Friday. Really sorry. So I do this and I think, God, everyone's so depressed. And I have tried to focus on some really good pieces of work, and I promise you there's been some great stuff going on. But yeah, when you talk about the future, it's just hard to see any kind of positives at the moment with this sector.
I think don't worry, because I think that's what's needed. It needs that harsh reality, because I think, as I said, the whole country is in panic as to nobody knows what's happening next. Yeah. But the majority of the country are in secure places, and so it's easy to forget about the people who aren't, who are on the edges, who don't really get seen, and it's easy to kind of forget that they're there. And I think it's important that we highlight the fact that they are there, and do whatever we can to support them in any way.
Absolutely, Richard.
Okay, so yeah, Russell just said we really need reality checks. That's a very good point, Russell. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I think that was a really good session. I said, well, I'll be putting the links to Simon on the Streets on wherever I post this post once it's kind of up and edited. But yeah, if anyone can kind of share this video, share the links across to Simon on the Streets, and whatever we can do collectively to help Simon on the Streets and other charities like that, because obviously this is Leeds, Kirklees and Bradford, but obviously there's the rest of the country is facing similar issues. I think it's important that we do whatever we can. So thank you, Natalie. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone else for spending your lunch hour with us. And hope you have a great weekend. Thanks a lot, guys.